Hey there, welcome to the Impact Driven Leader. This is your host, Tyler Dickerhoof. Glad to be here with you. If you're watching on YouTube, good to see you. Again, if you're listening on Apple or Spotify, Stitcher, I actually learned from the team that produces this podcast, Practice of Practice, that there's over 2,000 podcast platforms now. It's amazing. And so wherever you're listening, man, I'm glad you're here. Excited today to have the conversation with two individuals. It's three of us here. It is Benj Miller and Chris White. They are the founders of System and Soul. I'm excited for them to share. We really dig into kind of their system and ideology behind leadership. Chris and Ben shared their experiences growing businesses, finding a relationship together and saying, hey, there's more to this that was missing in each of our businesses that we want to combine and help other businesses. One of the facets that they describe and talk about is going from founder-led companies to leadership-led companies. Now, part of what they share is it doesn't mean you need to bring in executives. It maybe just changes the way that you look at it. This is what I see there, is when you do that, I have to imagine, and I'm going to have to follow up and ask him this because I'm going to say, does that mean that people move past where businesses own them? If you're a founder of an organization, if you're working in a small organization, maybe where there's not many people and you've felt that, man, I'm just owned by this. I can't get away from it. I know this is going to be a great episode for you to listen to, or if you know someone that's in that position, or maybe you work for someone. Maybe you own a company where that's what it feels like. Even though you have this large organization, I know you're going to get tremendous value from this conversation. Excited for it, and I'll catch you at the end. Chris and Benj, thanks for being here, guys. It's a pleasure to talk to you. It's a pleasure to get to know you both. I'm hopeful over the next 45 minutes or so that, not only the audience is going to get to know you guys better, but we're going to have a great leadership conversation. So with that, again, I'm excited to be here with you guys.
Yeah.
Thanks for having us, Tyler.
Super awesome.
One thing listening to your voice, Chris, and there's probably this amount of tone to it that you're kind of like, man, you take up a presence in a room. And I want to start there as I've listened to a little bit of your story. Let's start with that and say, from a leadership perspective, how much of that is a value, but how much of that is a challenge?
What a great question.
Well, that is a good question. I'm 6'3", 270, and I look like Mr. Clean, and I've got this voice that I've been blessed with. So sure, there is a physicality to all of that. And, as a leader, even recently, I have to be careful. I grew up in a household of 8 boys. I'm the 8th boy, and no girls. And yes, my mother was a saint. But, imagine that environment. And, it was competitive. It was candid. It was tough. You had to have thick skin. And, I carried that into adulthood. And I carried that into my professions and into the businesses that I've started. And, I thought I was pretty self-aware, but I had an incident a while back where, my voice and my physicality and my tone and my word selection worked against me. And it was a really big learning moment for me because, it was in my blind spot. And the person who I had this incident with, they're like one of the most bravest people I know, because Tyler, they stood up to me and they said, hey, I don't like, the words you're using right now. And so, I'm a learning animal, and I took that to heart, and you can't have an ego, man. You got to be humble. None of us are perfect, but you have to have a willingness to go look inside yourself and be honest with yourself. And that's what I did. And I call this person, at first I thought maybe they were the most sensitive person I ever worked with. But when I look back now and the growth, he's the most courageous person I've ever worked with.
Okay, so I want to set that on the coffee table here as we're having just a cup of coffee at the local shop. Yeah, I want to kind of transition that to yourself, Benj. You're a little bit younger. You have a more dynamic, personality, spiked hair, beard. how much of that, and again, this is all going to tie back into something, but how much of that in a leadership position or when you're trying to gain credibility is either an advantage or a challenge?
Tyler, I actually don't know. The beard is okay. because I just quit shaving, and the hair is because I don't know what to do with it. So there's not a whole lot of strategy right there.
I mean, let's just time out. For those that aren't watching on YouTube, obviously Chris and I have the exact same haircut. Like, this is by not choice. It's just, this is what I was given. You have choice, dude. Let's be honest. You have choice.
Fair. But I'm not willing to spend much energy on it. So just rough it up and let it go.
Yeah.
But here's what I would say to that is that I decided a long time ago that I was willing to just be myself. And if that didn't attract some people, then those people weren't for me. And that's it. I went to a stuffy kind of, everywhere. Everyone in the whole room had on their blazers and collared shirt breakfast, networking thing 2 weeks ago. And I walk in my t-shirt and jeans, and it's just, look, I'm going to do me. And it might be borderline rebellion, but it's more about, look here, I've got this tattoo. Let's see if we can pull it on the screen. It says undomesticated citizen of heaven. And it reminds me that one of the things that it reminds me is that most of our constructs of social norms are manufactured by someone somewhere that wasn't me. And so it's a little bit of taking back, a rebellion spirit to say, I have the freedom to create my own construct here. Yeah. Not you, not some unnamed party that's out there. And, when we talk about leadership, when we talk about visions and visionaries, I think that's what it is like, wait a minute, we have the ability to see who we want to be or what we want an organization to be and go create that.
I take and ask you guys those two questions. One, because it's, we're sitting here getting to know each other. It's pretty obvious. But, man, as I've lived both of those, as I've lived in that situation, the same, Chris, where I didn't realize my demeanor was having the impact and effect it was. And then otherwise, looking at, hey, how do I show up and what do I look like? And is that going to gain the attention and yield the value that I'm looking to attain? And I think if I look at those two issues, man, those are two leadership issues that I don't think many leaders understand they're dealing with, even though they're not dealing with. It's, your choice, Benj, to say, hey, this is who I am. And the sooner we get to that, man, coming back to what you, Chris, said, all of a sudden, all those things that are showing up that maybe aren't in our heart start to just get checked off because people aren't assuming, oh, this is what it is. And I want to start there in our conversation because, so much of what you guys do with System and Soul is not only create clarity, but also bring the heart into it. And so I want to just have that discussion is how did you guys get there, both individually, both together, and really in this construct of, leadership education and coaching and service to people, what are you guys focused around and why? So the modern day leader or the aspiring leader can say, hey, I can really take something from this. So that's a lot. I'd love to you guys just take and run with it as you guys, I know you can and do.
Yeah. Man, so I'll tell you what comes to mind is, and when you ask, well, how did we get here? I, in retrospect, was a very soulful leader. I had a company that I was running in my mid and early 20s, very, very young to be a leader. And I led it very soulfully. I cared a lot about the people, and I cared a lot about the culture, the identity of the organization. And that was a lot of fun, but it wasn't a fun business to run. And it wasn't until somebody introduced me to some systems that were kind of like the blocking and tackling that I didn't want to pay any attention to because it's blocking and tackling. And I wanted to do, alley-oops and Hail Marys, it's way more fun. But the systems actually, allowed the space for those other things to happen. And so then fast forward, and I'm now helping other organizations implement those same systems. and it just kept falling flat for me. Not because they weren't getting it, but it was like I was helping create really well-run shitty companies that didn't necessarily, they could block and tackle all day, but they weren't picking up yards. They weren't getting sacked, all the other things.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to bring, what I had learned as a soulful spirit. And I was able to basically put some systems around the soulful thing to make sure that it maintained truth as you grow and scale and evolve as an organization. And so we had the opportunity, Chris and I, maybe Chris has a different version of the story, but we had the opportunity to really package the whole thing and bring it to market. And for us, I know it feels way more like a mission or a movement than it does a company.
Yeah. Similarly for me, Benj and I had been coaching and had our practices and teaching. I'm a systems guy, so I'm on the other side of that coin. And, it was falling flat for me too, because I had all these wonderful clients, but I had a very limited toolbox. And so I started to, go outside of the given toolbox and finding tools so that I could help my clients meet them where they're at type of thing. And then, when Benj and I were, considering a change, we talked like, let's just go pray about it. And I don't remember how much time went by, but I got a call from Benj and he's like, hey, I got this little bar napkin drawing I got to talk to you about. And I said, okay. I said, but did you get a name? He goes, I did. And I go, okay, what's the name? And he says, System and Soul. And my jaw dropped. I'm like, that's it. We're not changing a thing. Now you can show me your napkin, because it just hit me. Like we had been talking about this for a long time, but he just pulled it together in that title. And I'm like, dude, we got the name. Now let's go build it. And we just, we're a good complement to one another. I'm a systems guy. He's a soul guy. So put us together and you just get this harmony. And boom, here we go. We've got this new framework that has evolved out of multiple frameworks that Benj and I are very familiar with and have taught in the past. But this is like the next evolution. And Benj is right. And I think I may have said this to him. This is a movement. This is a movement to help small business owners. Tyler, you asked like our why, right? And that's where we should all start, because without purpose, what are we doing? And so the reason we do what we do is because we believe the small businesses are the lifeblood of their local community. So if we could help them, then that helps that community to stabilize economically, providing jobs. And that's what we're about. And bringing those two sides together, I think, is the evolution of business frameworks.
So what do you see then is, I guess I would kind of speculate that the biggest challenge is a lot of those small businesses either don't have much leadership experience. They're just entrepreneurs that kind of ended up where they're at. Or maybe I took over a family business. I grew up on a farm. My family had a farm. I worked within agriculture for a long time. And so a lot of times it was just the next generation that took over. And it wasn't that they were a good business person or leader. It was just next man up. And without a lot of that understanding of what real leadership is, it can kind of fall back into, oh, you're just here doing the job. Just do the job, and that's what will move the business forward. And I think, as you guys have both identified, is, that doing the job could be, oh, I'm caring for people. Or that doing the job can be like, we're building the chair. We're just doing the system part of it. But it's not until you put those together that you can actually have an impact. Is that appropriate?
Yeah, I mean, it's probably too strong to say that you don't have an impact with either one of them. But when we put them together, we have something, on the system side, we say that we're just trying to accelerate the value creation. So it takes 10 years to be an overnight success. Well, maybe we can do it in 7 or 6 or 5, right? Let's just try and race the clock on this one and learn lessons not the hard way, because other people have already learned these lessons. And on the soul side, it makes us attractive. It brings the right people into the story in the roles that they are best fit to play, whether it be prospects or employees and shareholders. It just creates this story with a role for everyone. And so now if we put those two together, we have something that can create a competitive advantage and a durable longevity to this organization. A lot of what we do, we talk about when you, to rewind just a little bit with like true leadership, you know, we find ourselves most of the time, like our sweet spot is helping founder-led organizations transition to be led by senior leadership teams. So there's a little bit of counseling and psychology that happens, you know, for that founder that they've got to grow, mature. But then it's also raising up that next level of leaders for that organization and painting a picture of what that looks like and giving them the tools to do it.
In a lot of essence, I'm guessing you're teaching people how to let the bird fly out of the nest. It's how to hand the baby over to the preschool teacher and say, no, they're going to care for him just as much, if not more than you, maybe different.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. To tie back a little bit, and I asked a question, made a statement. So let me go back to the question: is where do you see the biggest challenge in those, you know, small businesses today that are just, you know, it's a part of our U.S. fabric. It's a part of the business fabric, not even U.S. of, you know, the whole construct of what leadership is and how that should act.
Yeah. Well, you know, the small businesses, they have limited resources, right? Like a small family business. I can recall, you know, I grew up, my parents started out as farmers too, and then they left the farm and went on to build two companies. So me and all my brothers, we worked in those companies. Now, my dad's style of leadership was dictatorial and you know, your mouth shut and your ears open and your feet moving. And that was how he rolled, right? But in a small business, you know, you're wearing a lot of hats, and they're typically founder-led. And what we want to help them do is go from a founder-led organization to a senior leadership team-led organization. Now, their senior leadership team, Tyler, might be two people. It might be the husband and wife, or it might be just the two partners and a couple of employees, maybe three people on the team. Either way, what we introduce early is our leadership tools, because there's an opportunity, you know, to cultivate and grow exceptional leaders even if you're small. And we have tools in the leadership section of our model where, you know, I always encourage my clients, like, okay, we're 10 people right now. Imagine we're 20. What would you do if we had 20 people? How would you reinvest in those people? Maybe we could be doing some of those things now, or at least laying the groundwork. But it does start with them first in their leadership skills. Yeah. So we have multiple tools to help them immediately, but also to help them invest in their future leaders in the organization so that they can start to learn communication skills, right? Just that, you know, there's a wonderful book that we all love at S2 called The Only Leaders Worth Following by Tim Spiker. And he did 5 years of research, and it narrowed it down. There's 2 attributes that every leader should have. And I'm looking at that. I'm like, yeah, that goes for the small business too. Like, why can't they have access, you know, to this material? So that's why Benj and I are creating these strategic partnerships with these subject matter experts around leadership so that we can pull in some tools to help these small businesses. That was long-winded. I'm sorry, but
yeah, no, I mean, hey, this is a conversation. I'm sitting and I'm still chewing and I'm drinking. So, you know, I appreciate that.
So the thing I would piggyback on that is in our model, it's actually behind Chris's head. You can see some of it, but when we start talking about people, one of the anchors, the place that we stop and end and kind of camp out on, because it's so core to the model of what we do, is leadership. And when I explain that, we all rise and fall by our definition, right? And leadership's one of those words like strategy or culture that, you know, means everything and nothing at the same time. So when it's really important that we explain how we approach leadership. And I say it like this: leadership is about leading yourself well. Mm-hmm. And then, people think, okay, if I can lead myself well, then I can lead other people. But I want to put a slight twist on that. If I can lead myself well, then maybe, just maybe, I can teach other people how to lead themselves well. And that's a different mindset, and it's a different game. And so that's the way that we approach this with all aspects, from a very, very practical example of how we infuse leadership. But this is so simple and tactical, but anybody who would manage somebody in an organization, we try and teach them to drive their car. And CAR is an acronym, right? So if we can give clarity, what is the job that I'm asking you to do? What is the mission of that job? How am I going to measure that job? What are you responsible for in there? What are the resources that you have at your disposal? If I can give you clarity, then I can give you autonomy. Go do your thing. Mm-hmm. If you weren't good at it, I wouldn't have hired you. I would have hired somebody else. So I want to be able to give you autonomy. And then if I give you clarity and give you autonomy, then we should be able to have conversations around the results. So clarity, autonomy, results. Tyler, the number one reason that we find that people don't hold their people accountable? What comes to mind?
It's of those three, it's the clarity. It's the willing to have the conversation of, this is what I expect of you, those expectations and understanding.
Yeah, but it's usually the guilt people have, because they're not sure if they gave their person clarity. So how can they hold them responsible, right? And so when we start talking about the results, there's a mutual accountability that starts to happen there, right? Like I have to be accountable for the clarity that I'm giving, presenting, and that they're receiving, right? And then if there's a breakdown, we've got to figure out where there is.
One thing I've noticed in my years at Motorola and then after Motorola and the companies that I've had, the great, and I'm thinking of one leader that I had that I really liked. He put me in a position to be successful, and then he got out of my way.
Yeah.
And he let me run.
So as I'm thinking about that, Chris, I'm thinking of that leader in myself that did that. And I think what's, coming back to what you said, Benj, is kind of that clarity, the autonomy, the results. And as you're telling that, and Chris, as you brought that in your own experience, I'm thinking about a leader when I was 18, 19 years old, and I go to work, have an internship during college, and he's like, I'm working for you today. Here's the project that we need to do. What am I, how are we going to do this? What are you going to do? And that has, again, some 25 years later, made an impact on me. But it's those little instances that I think if you experience that and recognize it and can tap back into it, it's like, oh, that's good, healthy leadership. Yeah. That's what I need to be doing as a leader. I may forget about it. I may have those, things, those insecurities that show up, or those blind spots or whatever else that cloud it. But if you can go back to that or find that.
Yeah.
Man.
Yeah.
Well, I think the essence of it is it's about the who of leadership, not the what they do. It's who they are as a person. Mm-hmm. I cut you off, Benj. I'm sorry, but it's the who, not what they do.
The who? Are we going to the who? I mean, that's probably a little.
Who they are.
I was going to change gears a little bit.
Go for it.
Because I think part of leadership that just doesn't get talked about enough is we talk about the clearness, right, with the clarity part of it, but you have to match that with the kindness. Like, Tyler, do I know what's important to you? What matters to you? Yeah. You just came into work today, but it's been 12 hours since you've been here, and you could have had a death in the family. Your cat could have thrown up on your bed sheets. Your wife is hounding mad at you. Like, if I don't, like, you can't just walk through a door and that stuff's magically gone. Right. Yeah. And so if, maybe in the days of like the industrial age when all you had to do was stamp on the pedal and pound out the sheet metal, like maybe that worked. But if you're in any kind of engaging work where you're having to use your brain, you're being affected by all of that in some way. And so to have a conscious appreciation for that as a leader, and to even go, hey, Tyler, you don't have the same twinkle in your eye today that you normally do. What, is there something going on? Can I be there for you? Is there something I can pick up for you? What is that? To have that level of awareness of your people, just to take that moment to care, that goes so far. Like that's miles and miles and miles.
Yeah. Kim Scott in her book, Radical Candor, right? In her 2x2 axis, in the vertical axis that goes up, she says, if you're going to be a leader or manager, you fundamentally have to care about your people that you're leading. And old leadership was more transactional. There's a huge shift to what Benj is talking about and becoming more relational. And that means more communication, more taps on the shoulder. It's not the thumb down type of leadership. It's the human connection. And instead of the transaction, it's building that relationship. And I mean, I was in a session one time. I was blown away, and we were doing a check-in. And I always have people share like good news from their personal life, right, to start the meeting. And this was probably a $20 million company, and over 100 people. And the one female executive checked in and said, "Hey, my personal good news is my daughter graduated from high school over the weekend." And another executive said, "You have a daughter?" And I was like, "What? Like, do you people not ever talk outside of like this room? Like, how does that even happen?" But I was just, so it's to Benja's point. Leadership now is you got to be a voracious learner, because you to be a great leader. Great leaders read and journal. They do a lot of habits, right? And those are habits like I teach my smaller companies too. Like, hey, Benj and I wrote a book teaching executives how to journal. Like, you want to be a good leader, you should sit down with this book and challenge yourself to answer some of these questions we're asking you, right? So that you can protect your confidence, right, when you're going through this stuff. And that's another thing leaders do, right? They really empathic, self-aware, right, curious.
Mm-hmm. As you describe all of that, Chris, and even, going back to all the things you shared, I'm guessing that's really your definition of soul, Benj. And I'm going to ask that first. What is your definition? How do you describe when someone's like, all right, I get system, but what's soul? Yeah.
It's hard to describe, but we all know it when we see it, because we can feel it, right?
I think that was the definition of pornography at one point, wasn't it?
Oh, no, that hurts me. I can do it. I can give you
There's our branding.
He's speechless. Let me bail you out here.
Well, it's a combination. I have to answer this question all the time, but it's a combination of your approach to leadership, the culture that you're creating, the identity of the organization, the purpose and destination, that you're framing up, but ultimately it's how you decide you're going to treat your people.
Yeah. The way that I would define what you guys have said, and this is my words, and I think this is where I see in the stuff that I talk to people about, and as I've had to grow and overcome, sharing a lot of the things that you first started with, Chris, that showing up in a room and not realizing the my facial expression, how I carry my body affects people. And that's when I started to understand what I describe as empathy. And I define that as putting your arms around someone and walking with them. And as you guys are talking about soul, and as you're talking, Chris, about being in that executive room and finding about the daughter and, the other executive not knowing that, well, then they never put their arms around each other.
Yeah.
And I look at organizations today, and empathy is thrown out so much. And yet I look at that and say, okay, how many people understand it, though? How many people understand what does that really mean? Because it's thrown out, put yourself in someone else's shoes. And I quickly say, well, if you're doing that, where are they? If you're putting themselves in their shoes, where are they? But if I'm standing side by side, I'm putting my arm around you, we're walking together, I can't drag you, you can't drag me. We have to figure out a pace that works. And to me, everything you described as the soul, man, that's active empathy. That's what real empathy looks like. having that, not caring more than them, but caring about them because of its impact to the organization and everyone in it.
Ladies and gentlemen, meet Tyler, our new chief evangelist for System and Soul.
Well, I recently read, I think it was a LinkedIn post or something. It was a culture thing about soul. And I think it was something to the effect of, if you want to know the soul of your business, find out how your employees feel Sunday night before they have to come to work on Monday morning.
Yeah.
And then another one was a company's soul could be the feeling your customer or client has after engaging with you.
Yeah.
And what is that
Love
feeling
that.
that they have? That would be another way.
Well, going back to that transactional piece that you were mentioning earlier, Chris, I don't think those were thoughts. You have a job, show up to the job, do the job. It doesn't matter.
Right.
Or,
Yeah.
hey, we did the job for you as a customer. Just be glad we did the job. Or, well, what do you mean we didn't deliver? And it's now understanding, if you want your business to actually grow and thrive and what I would say make a lasting impact, man, that stuff is so important. It's so transformational within a community. And I believe those are the organizations that we've seen and look around and say, man, they're changing the world.
Well, that was the thing that like Benj and I pinpointed just, the years that we had been coaching and identifying all the gaps in all these other systems and what they're missing. And we have a saying at S2, the system side of your business makes the soul side true. And the soul side makes the system matter.
I love that. Can
Yeah.
you say that again?
Sure. The system side of your business makes the soul side true. The soul side of your business makes the system matter.
Yeah. Because you can have one without the other so often, but until they're bound together, again,
I think that's our differentiator. That is clearly separating us from the pack.
And if we're talking about the people here, and then what we're driving toward is ultimate human dignity, like giving them the dignity of both the clarity of exactly what's expected. You were hired here to do a job. Let's not skip past that. Like, you need to be a profitable employee. But on the flip side, I can at the same time truly care about your well-being. And if your well-being is to graduate beyond this organization, so be it. I need to be in your corner for that. But whatever your best interest looks like, I need to be in your corner or side by side with my arm around you, like you said. I love Chris. I'm going to steal Chris's quote: more shoulder taps and less thumb presses. That's my new quote.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. There's a lot of great systems out there. There's a lot of great systems out there, but I believe that to Benj's point, they're lacking the humanity piece, and that's really all we did. Is we looked at that and we need to be people centric now more than ever. Given
sure.
2019, we had the Dorian that took out Freeport, Bahamas, and just sat on it. It was terrible. We've had just so many things. The pandemic, everything. We got to show more grace, man. We got to bring grace in. We got to bring humanity in. Everybody's been affected in one way or another, and those people, those effects come into work, and we just need to acknowledge that, and we need to be mindful. We need to be intentional. Don't run from it. Run towards it. And help your people. Double down on your people. I will make that bet all day long. Double down on your people.
Well, I think we're seeing now as, we're finishing up 22 and launching into 23, that the organizations, the leaders, the industries that have said, hey, whatever happens, but let's focus on the people that are making that happen. Man, we're going to continue to move forward. And the ones that have just said, well, you know what, you're just another cog in the wheel. If it's not you, we'll find someone else. I tend to see that those organizations have struggled not only to fill positions, but they're struggling internally, where we see this quiet quitting, where we see the resignation, where we see all these, fractures in leadership. And to me, that comes back to really what you were suggesting growing up, Chris, is we followed a system that was dictatorial because that's what we knew. And we followed that, even to your point, Benj, where you're saying, I followed the system of soul because obviously that was what you knew, but yet it didn't have maybe the repeatability, or it didn't have the effectiveness that lasted. And when you blend those, as I'm hearing from you guys, man, that's when we actually move past the dictatorial to more transformational. And that's with the soul and the heart and actually caring about people, which a generation, 2 generations ago, didn't really comprehend.
No, and they were termed soft skills, and that's a terrible way to describe these leadership skills.
Especially as a male.
About them, especially for a male.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're the ones that don't want to admit we don't know. No, I got this. It's certainly harder, but yeah, that's our idea, man. Is just pull these 2 sides together and put them in synchronicity. Like your people have to be in sync with your design, or it just doesn't work. I mean, it can work. You can be successful, but it's going to be a grind. You won't be as happy.
I don't think it lasts very long. I think that's the thing. It's the rocket ship, and it's like
you're always pushing uphill.
Yeah.
We're always pushing uphill, yeah.
Instead of getting the snowball to roll.
Yeah. One of the things that we're talking about a lot right now, as we, like you just mentioned, going into setting up 23 and what do we want 23 to look like? We talk about strategy a lot, and what is strategy? Well, strategy fits in between a vision for what we're trying to create, where we're going, and confident execution. If we don't have confident execution, then people give up on strategy, right? Because it's not, we've done this before, great ideas, they just don't happen, we can't get them done, so we give up and it becomes drab, right? So we need to have the confident execution, and we have the tools for that's the system, right? Put that in place so that you're a machine. But in the middle lies this focused strategy. And part of that is what are we going to do? But part of it is getting really, really clear on who are we, why does that matter, where we're going, and then how are we going to get there, right? And if we can start to answer all of those things, now we've got everybody aligned, energized, and focused.
So somebody listening in, to clarify that, you guys have a tool, right? You guys have a diagnostic tool that kind of helps start that.
Well, we have a diagnostic that looks like more holistically at your organization through the lens of the 6 elements of our model. We also have the roadmap that I just mentioned, which is that tool that sits in between vision and execution. And we'd be glad to give that to all of your listeners.
Yeah. So make sure we'll have that in the show notes, so that way people can access and take a look at it. And to me, those are help directing. It's like, okay, to your point, Chris, as we started, is you didn't realize it was a blind spot until someone said, this is a blind spot. And I think some of those tools, as I found it in myself, it's like, oh no, this is where you really need to work, because this is what's showing up as kind of the foundation of the holes in your bucket that is causing everything to leak out.
And if you want to be an exceptional leader, I will tell you though, you're gonna have to get out of your current comfort zone.
Yes.
You can't have an attitude, I got this. You got to perpetually engage, over communicate, but you also got to educate yourself and continually learn and improve. You can learn a bunch of different skills, but the idea is when you can become, it's that healthy balance of emotional maturity in your leadership, right? But here's the thing, Tyler. This is a lifelong journey. There's no end. We can continually improve ourselves, like Benj was saying. It starts with us, and if we continually improve and we can demonstrate that through our actions and our language, then that's just going to start permeating. But the great leaders take it to the next level, and they teach the next generation of leaders everything they learn. They pass it on.
and see that as an opportunity. As you're saying that, and I'm reflecting in this, learning and being open to it. Sometimes that mid-level manager, right? That mid-level leader, or maybe I'm thinking about the person that you shared, Chris, that kind of was brave enough to point out your blind spots. That's our opportunity a lot of times to help the leaders around us. Now, granted, they have to be open and willing. Sometimes we don't know if they're open and willing until we say something, until we help them identify that. And then that can come back twofold, meaning, oh, I learned that. Great. Here's everything else that comes from it. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Guys, I've loved the conversation. I know there's a lot of ways to keep up with you. I know, Benj, you had mentioned the newsletter that you have, the daily newsletter, the 261. I recommend people subscribing to that. We'll make sure we have that in the show notes. I loved it. Quick little read. What I found is how much, and this conversation proves it, how much that what you guys have experienced, what I've painfully experienced too, is really in alignment. And that's where I'm such a fan of what you guys are doing, because again, I've experienced it and through this conversation too, have seen it, and especially through the work that you guys put out. So I appreciate the time here. I appreciate you sharing with everyone. I look forward to more.
Thank you, Tyler. Great questions.
Thanks, Tyler.
Oh, thanks, guys. I hope you got tremendous value from Chris and Benj. I know they are going to provide such great tools. Yeah, it's in the show note links where you could go to the roadmap. You can check out the 261. I'm thankful for those guys to provide it. And in doing so, because I think if you can provide clarity, as Benj went through, clarity, autonomy, results, spend time focusing on clarity. Spend time with those expectations, that communication piece. As a leader, man, I think that's where so many, including myself, I am saying this is where I get in trouble. What am I doing to provide clarity? So that way autonomy is a part of that. And then we can measure results. Because without it, it's like Chris said, we end up being dictatorial. It's just show up, do your job. You're a cog. You're not a part of the organization. I believe this, and sharing what Chris and Benj did, this idea of getting people to buy in, to be a part of the organization, is really creating a system that centers around soul, and a soul that centers around a system, as Chris went through, that really defines a leadership ideology. I'm convinced of that. I'm convinced when those pieces come together, as so many of the thoughts that Chris and Benj and I share together as we evidence today, that's when you can make an impact. Man, I'm excited that you're here. Look for this coming up in the next month or so after the release of this episode. I'll be doing a special 2-day training to discuss some of these pieces, some of the impact-driven leader pathway ideology. Look for that. That'll be coming at you. Hopefully that you'll be able to sign up for that. Be glad to share more with you and expose a little bit about what the Impact-Driven Leader Roundtable is about. Would love for you to join that as well. Thanks for listening in. As always, if you got value from today's episode, please share. Please share for Benj, for Chris, for everything that they're trying to do as an organization to help the world of businesses get better. And as well, I'd love for you to share so someone else can be a part of this community. Thanks for being here. Catch you next time.